Sometimes I wonder if things would have turned out differently if I had just said no that day. No to helping, no to giving, no to staying quiet. But back then, I still believed that if I gave enough, loved enough, and stayed patient, they'd see me. They'd choose me too. I grew up in a little red brick house on Maple Lane. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Dad used to fix everything himself. Leaky faucets, broken fence posts, even the sagging porch step. Mom always kept the garden blooming with daisies and lavender. And my younger brother, Jason? He was the prince of the house. Jason was 4 years younger than me, and even from the beginning, it was clear he held a different position in the family. When I got an A, my parents smiled. When Jason got a B-, they clapped. "He tries so hard," Mom would say. "He's a boy, you know. School's harder for him." When he broke things, they were accidents. When I spoke up, I was dramatic. Still, I loved him. I loved all of them. And when I turned 18 and got accepted into college an hour away, I didn't make a fuss. I packed my bags, hugged my parents goodbye, and left the house on Maple Lane behind, trusting that it would always be there, our family's anchor. But things started shifting the moment I left. My parents never offered to help with my rent, even when I was juggling part-time jobs and classes. "You're doing great, sweetie," Mom would say on the phone. "It's good for you to learn independence." Meanwhile, Jason flunked out of community college and moved back home. "He's just figuring things out," Dad told me when I called, frustrated. "Not everyone finds their path right away." "Must be nice," I muttered, looking at the overdue rent notice on my kitchen table. By the time I was 26, I was living in a small but clean apartment and working full-time as a medical assistant. Every month, I sent my parents a little money to help out. Groceries, repairs, whatever they needed. It wasn't much, but it was consistent. Jason still lived at home. He was 22 and hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. But nobody talked about that. Not at birthdays, not at Christmas, not when I noticed the new car in the driveway with Jason's name on the plate. "Is that Jason's?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Dad chuckled. "Yeah, well, we co-signed. He needs to get around if he's ever going to land a decent job." "He doesn't have a job," I said. "How is he paying insurance?" There was a pause. Then Mom said sharply, "It's none of your business, Sophia. We're a family. We help each other." I bit my tongue. For years, I told myself to let it go. Family first. Be the bigger person. But something cracked the day I came home for Thanksgiving and noticed a for sale sign missing from the front yard. "Did you take the house off the market?" I asked, sipping coffee at the kitchen table. "Oh, honey," Mom said with a bright smile. "We didn't tell you. We decided not to sell. We're giving the house to Jason. He's going to settle down here. It's time." I blinked. "Wait, giving? As in, signing over the house?" "Of course," Dad chimed in. "It's the least we can do to help him get on his feet." I sat there stunned, the mug trembling in my hands. "You're giving him the house? Well, I've been paying rent on my own for nearly a decade. Sending you money?" "You've always been the responsible one," Mom said, as if it were a compliment. "You don't need help." "And Jason does?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "He's done nothing. You've handed him everything on a silver platter while I've worked for every scrap." Mom's face changed then. Tight, defensive, cold. "You're sounding very ungrateful, Sophia. You should be happy for your brother. Honestly, sometimes I think you resent him just because he's loved." "Loved?" I repeated, stunned. "Yes," she snapped. "You're nothing but a freeloader, Sophia. You take care of yourself." It hit like a punch to the gut. I'd been paying my way since I was 18, sending them money every month, showing up when they needed help, and somehow I was the freeloader. That night, I packed my bag early and drove back to my apartment in silence. No goodbye hugs, no leftovers packed to take home. Just that sentence playing over and over in my head. "You're nothing but a freeloader. You take care of yourself." And so I did. I took care of myself. For real this time. But I also did something else. I stopped the money train. The first morning after I canceled the transfers, I woke up expecting to feel guilty. I thought the silence in my apartment would feel like abandonment, like I'd cut off a limb or walked away from something sacred. But instead, I felt light. Like I could finally breathe without dragging a 1,000-pound anchor behind me. That feeling didn't last long. It started with a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was deceptively cheerful, but I could hear the tension behind each word. "Hi, sweetie. I think something's wrong with the bank. The money didn't come through this month. Can you check on that? Hope you're well." I stared at the phone for a long moment, thumb hovering over the delete button, before pressing play again, just to be sure I'd really heard what I thought I did. No concern, no question about how I was doing. Just a request. No. A demand, dressed up in sweetness. That voicemail was followed by a text from Jason, just 2 words. "Where's rent?" No hi, no punctuation, not even a question mark. Just entitlement. By the end of the week, I'd received 3 more messages from Mom, each a little less sweet than the last. The final one was short and sharp. "Sophia, you can't just cut us off like this. Jason is counting on that money. And I don't appreciate being punished for a decision that was made for the good of our family." I didn't reply. For the first time in years, I chose silence. The following Sunday, my Aunt Linda called. She's my mom's older sister, a woman who always kept a healthy emotional distance from the drama but never missed a family holiday. I could hear the caution in her voice. "Sophia, your mom's been calling me. She's upset." "Because I stopped sending her money," I said flatly. There was a pause. "Yes, but also because, well, she says you're being selfish, that you're abandoning the family." I let out a bitter laugh. "I've been the family for years, Linda. Who do you think's been paying for groceries, for the plumber, for Jason's car repairs? They gave him the house and called me a freeloader." Linda sighed. "I know. I told her this would come back to bite her, but she's always had a blind spot where Jason's concerned. I just wanted to check in on you." "I'm fine," I said. "Better, actually." And that was the truth. Despite the barrage of guilt from Mom and Jason, there was something empowering about cutting the cord. I was finally living for myself, not waiting to be seen by people who never wanted to see me in the first place. But my peace didn't last long. A few weeks later, I came home from work to find an envelope slipped under my door. No return address, just my name written in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter, written in blue ink, slanted and rushed. "Sophia, I can't believe how cruel you've become. You think we're just mooching off you? That Jason doesn't deserve a chance? He's struggling. He's had setbacks. You, on the other hand, have always had it easy. Scholarships, a job, your own place. Not everyone's path is that simple. Jason needs the house. We need that money. And frankly, if you can't support your family in hard times, maybe you're not as good a daughter as you think you are. Your mother." I sat on my kitchen floor, the letter dangling from my fingertips. My stomach churned. Not because her words hurt, but because this time, they didn't. Not like before. I realized something in that moment. My mother wasn't writing from love or concern. She was writing from fear. Fear that the person she depended on was finally done. That the daughter who always gave, always complied, had disappeared. And she was right. I was done. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Then I got a call from my old neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. "Honey, I don't mean to meddle," she began, "but I saw Jason in your parents' front yard last night screaming into his phone, throwing things. Sounded like he was yelling about bills." I thanked her and hung up, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Jason was finally facing the real world, and it was eating him alive. I knew what was coming next. And I was right. A week later, Mom called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. This one wasn't sweet or angry, it was desperate. Sophia, please, Jason's not handling this well. He's talking about selling the house, about moving in with some girl who doesn't even work. I don't know what to do. Please, we need you. I stared at the screen. Then slowly, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I deleted the message. No callback, no explanation, just silence. They gave away the house I grew up in. They gave away their daughter in the process. And I was finally beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, that was a gift. It had been nearly 2 months since I stopped the payments. 2 months since I'd drawn a line in the sand, and for a while, I'd thought that maybe, just maybe, they'd accept it and move on. But I should have known better. The silence didn't last, because when guilt no longer worked, manipulation stepped in. It started with a knock on my door on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole cautiously. And there he was. Jason, hair slicked back like he was trying too hard, a cheap hoodie soaked through, and a smirk that made my stomach twist. Open up, Soph. We need to talk, he said, as if we were old friends catching up over coffee. I didn't move. Sophia, come on, I know you're in there. Still, I said nothing. Eventually, I heard him mutter something under his breath before walking away, shoes slapping angrily through the puddles. That should have been the end of it. But 2 days later, I found him again, this time sitting in the lobby of my office building. Sophia, he said, standing as I stepped out of the elevator. Don't make a scene. He looked worse than the last time I'd seen him. Pale, unshaven, twitchy, like someone who'd spent too many nights awake, too many mornings hungover. I walked past him without a word. Wait, he snapped, grabbing my arm. You're really gonna do this? Just cut us off and pretend like we don't exist? I yanked my arm free and turned to face him. You've existed just fine, Jason. On my dime. For years, you're so dramatic. He scoffed. Mom's sick over this, you know. You've ruined her. No, Jason, I said quietly. She ruined herself by choosing to protect you instead of raise you. And now she wants me to clean up the mess. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. Wow, you really think you're better than us. I think I worked for everything I have. You wouldn't know what that feels like. He stepped back like I'd slapped him. Fine, he muttered. You'll regret this. Family's all you have. But that was the thing. He wasn't my family anymore. Not the kind that meant safety or love or loyalty. Just shared blood and years of disappointment. The next week, I got a call from my old high school friend, Rachel. Hey, she said hesitantly. I saw your mom at the church potluck. She was telling people things. What kind of things? She hesitated. That you cut her off. That you've gone cold, ungrateful. That you're too busy climbing the corporate ladder to care about your own mother. I exhaled slowly. Of course she did. She also said you threatened Jason. That stopped me cold. What? Yeah. She said he came to talk to you and you threatened to call the police. Said you're trying to tear the family apart. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so typical. This was always Mom's talent, rewriting the story until she was the tragic hero and I was the cruel daughter. That never happened, I said flatly. I figured, Rachel replied. Just wanted you to know what's going around. What struck me wasn't that Mom was twisting the truth. It was how easily she'd weaponized it. I'd grown up thinking that family meant loyalty, honesty, love. But for her, family meant control. And the moment she couldn't control me anymore, she rewrote me into the villain. The final straw came 3 days later. I had just finished cleaning my apartment when my phone buzzed. An email from a realtor. Hi, Sophia. Following up regarding your inquiry. I've attached the listing for the house on Maple Lane as discussed. Let me know if you'd like to schedule a tour. I froze. I hadn't contacted any realtor. I hadn't asked for a tour. Confused, I opened the attachment. And there it was. My childhood home. Listed for sale. Photos of the living room where we once put up Christmas trees. The kitchen where Mom used to bake banana bread. It was all there, staged and spotless. And not a single trace of our family left in it. I called Aunt Linda in a panic. "They're selling it?" I asked. "After giving it to Jason?" She sighed. "He's in debt, Sophia. Maxed out 3 credit cards. He's already pawned your dad's old tools, sold the riding mower. I guess the house was next." My throat tightened. Not because I wanted the house. I didn't. But because it was never about the house. It was about what it represented. Years of memories, sacrifice, of believing that home was something permanent. And now it was being flipped for cash like it meant nothing at all. They gave it to him. He gutted it. And now they expected me to pick up the pieces. But I wouldn't. Not this time. They'd burned the bridge. And all I could do now was make sure I didn't build it back. I didn't cry when I saw the house listing. I thought I would. I expected it, even prepared for it. But the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt hollow, like something inside me had finally snapped loose and floated away. I stared at the photos for a long time. The beige walls had been repainted a trendy gray. The daisy garden was gone, replaced by a layer of decorative rocks. The front porch swing where Dad used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings had vanished, replaced by a generic bench with throw pillows. It looked like any other house now. Any stranger scrolling Zillow would never know what used to live there, what used to matter there. The longer I looked, the more I realized. The house was already gone. Not just physically, spiritually, emotionally. It had stopped being mine the moment my parents decided it was Jason's reward for existing. I closed the listing, exhaled slowly, and opened a new tab. Savings account. For months, I'd been quietly moving the $1,500 I used to send them into a dedicated fund. I hadn't really thought about what I'd use it for. At first, it was just a silent protest, a way to reclaim a piece of myself. But now I knew. It was time to build something of my own. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, just out of love. For myself. I started browsing listings in nearby neighborhoods. Modest homes. Quiet streets. Nothing fancy, just something stable. Something I could fill with warmth on my terms. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next day, I made a list of everything I needed to do. Credit checks, down payment details, mortgage prep. It was overwhelming but exhilarating. For once, my energy wasn't being drained by a family crisis. It was being poured into me. And maybe that was the biggest shift. I was finally choosing myself. Still, the ghosts lingered. On Sunday, I found myself reaching for the phone, out of habit. I used to call Mom every week, just to check in, to make sure she was okay, to ask about Jason, even though I dreaded the answers. But now, what was there left to say? She had made her choice. Over and over again, and each time it hadn't been me. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Aunt Linda. "I thought you should know. Your mom asked the church for financial support. Said her daughter abandoned her. Said Jason was struggling and that nobody was helping." I stared at the message, a bitter taste rising in my throat. Even now, even after everything, she was still playing the victim. Abandoned? I had been the one abandoned. Emotionally, financially, spiritually. But the narrative she was spinning had erased all of that. In her story, I was the cold daughter, the selfish one. And maybe that hurt more than anything else. Because she was rewriting history, one whisper at a time. I replied to Linda's message. Let her say what she wants. I'm done correcting the record. And I meant it. Let her build her version of events. Let Jason wallow in his delusions. Let them both cling to the story where they were wronged. I was too busy writing a new one. Mine. That week, I scheduled a tour for a little two-bedroom bungalow on the edge of town. It wasn't perfect. The backyard needed work, and the kitchen was a time capsule from 1992. But the moment I stepped inside, something clicked. It felt safe. I ran my fingers along the worn banister, picturing weekend mornings with coffee and music, dinners with friends, a quiet life built not on appeasement or sacrifice, but on peace. The real estate agent smiled at me. "It has good bones," she said. "So do I replied before I could stop myself. That night, I put in an offer. It was accepted the next morning. And just like that, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. I was building something real. And no one, not my mother, not Jason, not their manufactured crises, could touch it. They could spin their stories. They could gossip and play victims. But I had chosen to step out of their orbit, to stop begging for scraps of affection, to stop proving my worth to people who were determined not to see it. I was done being the good daughter if that meant being the invisible one. This new life, it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The house was mine. The deed was signed, the boxes unpacked, and the air filled with the soft scent of freshly brewed coffee and lemon-scented cleaner. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. A place no one gave to me, no one could take away, and no one would use against me. For the first time in my life, I had something that belonged only to me. I was still getting used to the quiet. There were no passive-aggressive voicemails, no late-night texts from Jason asking for a little help, no guilt-laced messages from Mom implying I owed them for daring to be independent. Peace was strange, but beautiful. And then, on a Sunday afternoon in early spring, someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the window and felt my heart drop. Jason. He stood there like a misplaced memory. Unkempt, eyes bloodshot, hands stuffed into the pockets of a worn hoodie. He hadn't changed, still carried himself like the world owed him something. I didn't want to open the door. Every cell in my body told me not to. But I did, because some part of me needed to hear what he had come to say. "Hey," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. I didn't respond. I just leaned against the doorframe and waited. He shifted uncomfortably. "Can I come in?" "No," I said, calm and steady. "Say whatever you came to say right here." He scratched at the back of his neck and looked around like someone might rescue him from the awkwardness. "Mom's sick," he said finally. I didn't flinch. I waited. "She fell a couple weeks ago. Hurt her hip pretty bad. The doctor said she needs surgery, but, well, you know, we can't afford it." There it was, the pitch. "Insurance?" I asked. "Denied part of the claim. Said it was pre-existing. I don't know, it's complicated." I crossed my arms. "So what does this have to do with me?" He blinked like he couldn't believe I was asking. "She needs help, Soph. Real help. And you've always been the responsible one." There it was again. You're the responsible one. Their favorite justification for why I had to fix everything. "You're her son," I said. "You live in the same town. Why aren't you helping her?" His face darkened. "You think I haven't tried? I've been taking care of her alone for months while you're off living your best life in your cute little house." The words stung, but not in the way he intended. They didn't make me feel guilty. They made me angry. "Taking care of her?" I repeated. "Jason, she's been taking care of you your whole life. And now that she actually needs someone, you come running to me?" His jaw clenched. "This isn't fair, Sophia. She's our mom." "No," I said. "She was your mom. I was just the backup plan. The ATM, the one who didn't need help, so they never gave it." He looked stunned, like he hadn't expected me to say it out loud, like deep down he knew it was true. "She's asking for one last chance," he said. to fix things. She talks about you all the time. Says she wishes you'd come back. That she messed up. Did she send you? I asked. He hesitated. She doesn't know I'm here. I raised an eyebrow. So you're here to manipulate me on her behalf? And she doesn't even know? Or did she just not want to be the one to face me? He didn't answer. I sighed and stepped back slightly. I hope she recovers, Jason. I do, but I'm not paying for it. And I'm not coming back. But, no, I said sharply. She made her choice. So did I. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. You really don't care, do you? And there it was. The final card they always played. If you don't help, you don't care. I do care, I said quietly. I cared for years, and it nearly broke me. But caring doesn't mean I have to keep letting you bleed me dry. He took a step back. You've changed. Yeah, I nodded. I finally did. He lingered a moment longer, like he might say something else. But then he turned and walked down the steps without another word. As I closed the door, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the family I'd never really had. Relief that I'd finally stopped pretending I ever would. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down in the sunlight streaming through my window. Jason was right. I had changed, and it was the best thing I'd ever done. Spring came early that year. The trees on my street bloomed in soft pinks and whites, like nature had decided to throw a celebration just for me. It had been nearly a year since I stopped sending money. A year since the house on Maple Lane was sold. A year since I'd heard my mother's voice. In that time, something inside me had shifted in ways I hadn't expected. I no longer woke up with that tight knot in my chest, dreading a text, an email, a call asking for more. I stopped flinching when an unknown number flashed on my screen. I smiled more, slept deeper, took up weekend hikes, started reading again. I even adopted a cat. Marbles, a clumsy little rescue who insisted on knocking things off the counter just to watch them fall. There was no single moment when I knew I'd healed. It was more like a quiet unfolding. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and had finally remembered how to exhale. But the real turning point came in the most unexpected way. I was at the grocery store, comparing almond milk brands, when I heard someone behind me say my name. Sophia? I turned. It was Mrs. Jennings, our old neighbor from Maple Lane. She used to bring over casseroles when Dad was alive and had this permanent scent of lilac perfume and cinnamon gum. My goodness, she said, smiling warmly. I almost didn't recognize you. You look happy. I laughed softly. I am. She placed a hand over her heart. I'm so glad, sweetheart. I've worried about you. After all that mess with the house and your mother? I nodded gently, not eager to rehash old stories, but she wasn't finished. Do you ever hear from them? No, I said simply, and I'm okay with that. She studied me for a moment, her expression shifting to something almost regretful. Your mom used to sit on the porch some nights after you moved out. I'd see her just staring into the dark, sometimes crying. I think she always thought you'd come back, that she could fix it. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to scoff. Another part, a smaller, quieter part, just felt tired. I used to think I had to fix it too, I said, but I learned the hard way. You can't heal in the same place that broke you. Mrs. Jennings nodded. No, you can't, but you can grow somewhere new. That night, I sat on my back porch with marbles curled beside me, a blanket wrapped around my legs, and a quiet peace settling into my bones. I thought about my mother, about Jason, about the version of me that had once believed love was something you had to earn by sacrificing parts of yourself. And then I thought about the girl who moved into this little house with nothing but a savings account, a few bruises on her soul, and a flicker of hope. She had no idea she was building a life. Not just a refuge, but a future. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven them. And the truth is, I don't know. Forgiveness isn't always some grand declaration. Sometimes it's just choosing not to carry the weight anymore. It's waking up and making your coffee without bitterness. It's not looking back. And maybe that's enough. I haven't heard from Jason since that day he showed up on my porch. Rumor has it he moved in with his girlfriend's parents, burned through the last of Mom's savings, and floated from job to job, always chasing the next excuse. As for Mom, I don't know. Aunt Linda says she still lives nearby, still goes to church, still complains about me to anyone who'll listen. But none of that matters anymore, because I've finally learned the most important truth of all. Being someone's daughter doesn't mean sacrificing your happiness to earn their love. Love given with conditions isn't love. It's leverage. And I'm done being leveraged. These days, I spend my energy on the people who show up without asking for anything in return. Friends who remember my birthday. Coworkers who check in just because. Strangers who hold the door with a smile. And most of all, myself. I planted a garden last month. Just some herbs and a few stubborn sunflowers. Nothing fancy. But when I kneel in the dirt, feel the sun on my back, and watch something grow where there was once only emptiness, I think this is what healing looks like. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, steady growth.
My greedy husband and his wicked mother plotted my death for my $100 million, poisoning my dinner and celebrating my end. They threw me on the beach, but their joy was short-lived. The very next day I walked back into their lives alive, unbroken, and ready to unleash a revenge they couldn't escape. My husband and his diabolical mother-in-law celebrated my death after poisoning me for my $100 million inheritance, tossing me out like yesterday's trash. But they didn't count on one thing: I survived. The next day I returned with a master plan to destroy them, and their nightmare was only beginning. My name is Evelyn, and for the longest time I thought my life was perfect. I was married to Jake, a handsome and ambitious businessman, and we lived in a beautiful home in an affluent suburb of Chicago. To the outside world, I had everything: love, comfort, and security. But behind the closed doors of that house, my life was far from perfect. Jake and I had been married for 5 years. At first he was everything I could have hoped for: caring, charming, and supportive. Things changed when my father passed away. Losing him was devastating. He was my rock, my biggest supporter. But even in my grief, I felt a glimmer of hope because he left me $100 million inheritance. I thought it would be a safety net for our future, a way to honor his legacy. Little did I know, it would become the reason my life turned into a nightmare. It all began with Diane, Jake's mother. Diane was in her late 50s, a retired socialite who lived for appearances. She was always impeccably dressed, her smile polished but insincere. I'd always felt she didn't like me, but after my father's passing, her disdain became more obvious. She began spending more time at our house under the guise of supporting us during a difficult time, but I knew better. Diane wasn't there to support me, she was there to meddle. I noticed small changes at first: Diane whispering to Jake, long conversations that would abruptly end when I entered the room. Jake became distant, snapping at me over trivial matters and questioning my decisions. It hurt, but I chalked it up to grief. I never imagined how deep Diane's manipulations ran. One evening Diane sat me down in the kitchen. "Evelyn dear," she began with a sickly sweet tone, "you need to think carefully about your inheritance, Jake, and I just want what's best for you. Managing such a large sum can be overwhelming." Her words sounded kind, but her eyes told another story. She wanted control. I brushed her off, saying I had plans to work with my father's trusted financial advisor. Her smile faltered, and I saw a flash of anger. That's when I knew she wouldn't give up easily. A few weeks later I started feeling unwell: nausea, dizziness, fatigue. At first I thought it was stress or the grief catching up to me, but it kept getting worse. I noticed it was especially bad after meals. I tried to ignore it, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the dining room, finishing dinner with Jake and Diane. The food tasted off, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Moments later the world started spinning. I felt my legs give way, and I collapsed to the floor. The last thing I heard before everything went black was Diane's voice, cold and triumphant: "It's time." When I woke up I wasn't in my house. I was lying on a park bench, my body weak and trembling. My mind raced, trying to piece together what had happened. Had Jake carried me here? Had Diane? Before I could make sense of it, a man's voice broke through my haze. "Miss, are you okay? Can you hear me?" I turned my head to see a kind face, a middle-aged man who looked genuinely concerned. I couldn't speak, but he didn't wait for an answer. He called and stayed with me until the ambulance arrived. His kindness was a lifeline in that moment. At the hospital the doctors confirmed my worst fears. There were traces of poison in my system. Someone had been poisoning me, and it wasn't a one-time thing. It had been happening over weeks. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Diane, Jake, they had done this to me. But why? The answer became clear when I overheard a conversation between two nurses outside my room. "She's lucky that man found her," one said. "They said she's got a $100 million inheritance. Makes you wonder who'd want her out of the picture." I felt sick, but not from the poison this time. It was from the betrayal. My husband, the man I loved, and his mother had tried to kill me. And for what? Money? Rage filled me, but so did determination. I wasn't going to let them win. I spent the next few days recovering, but I also began planning. Diane and Jake thought they'd gotten away with it, but they didn't realize I was still alive. I didn't know how I would fight back, but I promised myself one thing: I wouldn't let them destroy me. And so I started my journey. Not just to reclaim my inheritance, but to reclaim my life. Little did they know they had awakened a side of me they'd never seen before. This was far from over. When I left the hospital, I was physically weak but mentally sharper than ever. I knew I couldn't return home to face Jake and Diane without a plan. They believed they had succeeded in getting rid of me, but I was alive, and that was my advantage. I found refuge in a small hotel a few miles away, using the cash I had on hand to pay for a room. As I sat on the edge of the bed, the betrayal washed over me again. Jake, the man I had vowed to love and honor, had thrown me away like I was nothing. And Diane, her greed knew no bounds. I was done crying. I needed answers and I needed proof. The first thing I did was call my father's financial advisor, Mr. Stanton. He was one of the few people I trusted completely. "Evelyn," he said, relief evident in his voice when he picked up. "I've been trying to reach you. Is everything all right?" "Not exactly," I admitted. "I think Jake and Diane are trying to steal my inheritance. Can you check if anything unusual has happened with my accounts?" "I'll look into it right away," he assured me. "Stay safe, Evelyn." A few hours later, Stanton called back, his voice grave. "Evelyn, there have been attempts to transfer funds from your accounts into a new trust under Diane's name. The documents claim you authorized it?" My heart sank. "I didn't. She forged my signature." "I thought as much," he said. "I've frozen all activity on your accounts, but you'll need to act fast. They're not going to stop hearing that Diane was already trying to steal what was mine." Lit a fire in me. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance anymore. I was fighting for justice. I decided to start by gathering evidence. If Diane and Jake had been bold enough to forge documents, they might have left other trails behind. I started with social media. Diane had always been careful about her image, but she underestimated the power of a digital footprint. I combed through her posts and found photos of her at lavish events wearing expensive jewelry and designer clothes she hadn't known before. Where had she gotten the money? And then there was Jake. His Instagram was filled with cryptic captions like, "The start of a new era, and bigger things ahead." My stomach churned at the thought that they were celebrating their plans to ruin me. But social media alone wouldn't be enough. I needed something stronger, something undeniable. I decided to go back to the house knowing it was a risk. I waited until I knew Diane would be out. She had a standing lunch appointment with her bridge club every Tuesday. Jake would be at work. It was the perfect time. When I entered the house, the familiar scent hit me like a wave of nostalgia and pain. This had been my home, my safe place. Now, it felt like enemy territory. I moved quickly, heading to Diane's room first. She kept a lockbox in her closet. I'd seen her put papers in there before. After a few tries, I found the key taped under a drawer. Inside, I hit the jackpot. There were forged documents with my name, copies of my bank statements, and even a handwritten note outlining Plan B if I didn't cooperate. The note mentioned the poison and how Jake would take care of things if I became suspicious. My hands shook as I read it. This wasn't just fraud. This was attempted murder. I took pictures of everything with my phone before putting it all back exactly as I found it. On my way out, I passed the dining room and froze. The chair where I had collapsed that night was still there, a stark reminder of how close I had come to dying. I felt a surge of anger and vowed to make them pay. That evening I sat in my hotel room staring at my phone. I had the evidence, but I needed to make sure it reached as many people as possible. That's when the idea hit me: social media. Diane and Jake had spent years curating their image as the perfect family. What better way to shatter it than by exposing their true selves? I created a video, carefully piecing together everything I had: photos of the forged documents, screenshots of their social media posts, and even my hospital records showing the poison in my system. I narrated the video myself, telling the world what had happened. "My name is Evelyn," I began, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "This is the story of how my husband and his mother tried to kill me for my inheritance." I hesitated before posting it, worried about the fallout. But then I thought of my father, how he had always told me to stand up for what was right. With a deep breath, I hit upload. The response was immediate. Within hours, the video went viral. Comments flooded in, some offering support, others expressing outrage at Jake and Diane. News outlets picked up the story, and suddenly, the perfect facade they had built was crumbling. Diane's friends from her bridge club, Jake's business associates, even neighbors who had once idolized them, all were shocked. I watched it all unfold from my hotel room, a mix of satisfaction and fear swirling in my chest. This was only the beginning. Diane and Jake wouldn't take this lying down, but neither would I. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. They had tried to silence me, but now the whole world knew the truth. I wasn't going to stop until justice was served. This was my life, my inheritance, and my fight, and I was just getting started. The days after I uploaded the video felt like a whirlwind. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years, offering their support. Others were from reporters asking for interviews, but I ignored them. I didn't need fame or publicity, I needed justice. As the world turned against Diane and Jake, I kept a close eye on their movements. From the little I could gather, Diane was furious and Jake was panicking. They had underestimated me, and now they were scrambling to do damage control. A week later, I received an anonymous message through social media. "I have information about Diane," it read. Skeptical but curious, I responded. The sender turned out to be one of Diane's former friends from her bridge club. She told me that Diane had been borrowing money from everyone she knew, spinning lies about needing it for family emergencies. It was clear now how desperate Diane had been even before my father's inheritance became a target. This was another piece of the puzzle, and I stored the information carefully. My plan was coming together, but I still needed more. I wasn't just going to let them squirm. I wanted airtight evidence that would leave no room for doubt. One afternoon I received a call from Mr. Stanton, my father's financial advisor. "Evelyn, I think I've found something you'll want to see," he said. "Diane has been working with a shady attorney to create new forged documents. They're trying to make it look like you willingly handed over control of your estate." I clenched my fists, my anger rising. "Can you get me copies of those documents?" "I already have," he replied. "I'll send them over." "Be careful, Evelyn. They're cornered, and that makes them dangerous." Dangerous was an understatement. Diane was already known for her fiery temper, and the public backlash had only made her more unhinged. She had lost friends, her social standing, and her polished reputation. Now, she was blaming me for her downfall, completely ignoring her own actions. I decided it was time to confront Diane directly. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about holding her accountable for everything she'd done, but I wasn't foolish enough to go in unprepared. I knew Diane's temper would be my greatest weapon. I reached out to her through Jake. "Tell your mother to meet me at the family estate," I said. "I want to discuss a settlement." Jake sounded wary but intrigued. "A settlement? You're finally coming to your senses." I bit back the urge to scream. "Let's just say I'm tired of fighting." He agreed to set up the meeting, clearly unaware that I had no intention of settling. Instead, I planned to record everything, hoping Diane would incriminate herself further. The estate, once my home, now felt like a battlefield. I arrived early and set up a hidden camera in the living room, positioning it to capture the entire space. My heart pounded as I waited for Diane. This confrontation could go terribly wrong, but I had to take the risk. When Diane arrived, she was seething. Her eyes burned with anger and her voice stripped with sarcasm. Well, the prodigal daughter returns. "What's this nonsense about a settlement?" I kept my voice steady. "Diane, we need to end this before it gets worse. Let's talk." She crossed her arms and smirked. "Talk? Oh, sweetheart, the time for talking is over. You ruined everything. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to keep this family together? And for what? So you could play the victims?" I stayed calm, knowing she was walking straight into my trap. "You tried to kill me, Diane. How is that keeping the family together?" Her smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl. "You don't understand anything. That money should have been ours. Jake deserved it, not you. You think you're some saint, but you're just as selfish as the rest of us." She was unraveling, and I let her continue. "Jake and I did what we had to do. If you'd just handed over the inheritance like a good little wife, none of this would have happened." I stared at her, feigning shock. "So you admit it? You poisoned me? You forged those documents?" Her face turned red and she screamed, "Yes, and I'd do it again if it meant getting rid of you." My hands trembled, but I held her gaze. "Thank you for being honest, Diane." Before she could respond, I stood up and walked to the hidden camera, pulling it from its spot. Diane's eyes widened as realization dawned. "What is that?" I held it up, my heart racing. Proof that you and Jake tried to destroy me. This is going straight to the police and the court." Diane lunged at me, her nails digging into my arm. "You littles." I pushed her off and stepped back, my voice steady. "You've lost, Diane. It's over." She screamed in frustration, but I didn't stay to watch her tantrum. I walked out of the estate, the hidden camera clutched tightly in my hand. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. That night, I reviewed the footage, my stomach churning at the venom in Diane's words. But I also felt a flicker of hope. This was the evidence I needed to finally take them down. Diane had revealed her true self, and now the world would see her for who she really was. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I prepared for the next battle court. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. This wasn't just about reclaiming my inheritance anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, and I wasn't going to let Diane or Jake take that away from me ever again. The day of the trial arrived faster than I expected. I was nervous but determined. Diane and Jake would be there facing the consequences of their actions, and I was ready to expose their lies. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance, I was fighting for my dignity and my life. The courtroom was filled with tension. Diane sat beside Jake, her expression cold and defiant, while Jake avoided looking at me altogether. The once confident man I had married now seemed small and insignificant. It was strange to think I had ever loved him. My lawyer started with the recordings I had captured during my confrontation with Diane. The courtroom was silent as her voice echoed through the speakers, her venomous confession playing for everyone to hear. "Yes, and I'd do it again, if it meant getting rid of you." Her words hung in the air, and I could see the judge's expression harden. Diane's lawyer tried to object, but it was clear they had no defense. The evidence was damning. Next came the forged documents. Mr. Stanton had testified earlier about Diane's attempts to transfer my inheritance into her name. He explained the forged signatures, the illegal transactions, and how he had managed to stop them just in time. The jury was visibly shocked as each piece of evidence stacked against Diane and Jake. When it was my turn to testify, I told my story, starting from the night I collapsed at the dining table. I described the betrayal, the poisoning, and the moment I realized the people I trusted most had plotted to end my life for money. My voice trembled at times, but I didn't hold back. This was my truth, and I wasn't going to let fear silence me. The prosecution presented the medical evidence, hospital reports confirming the poison in my system, and the timeline that matched Diane's presence in the house. The Good Samaritan who found me testified about how he had seen me unconscious and called for help. His sincerity was a stark contrast to Diane's cold demeanor. Then came the turning point. Diane took the stand, and it was clear she was unraveling. At first she tried to play the victim, accusing me of being manipulative and stealing her family, but the prosecutor was relentless. He cornered her with the recordings, the forged documents, and her own web of lies. Under pressure, Diane lost her composure. "I did what I had to do," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger. She didn't deserve that money. Jake and I, her lawyer, tried to stop her, but the damage was done. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, and I felt a wave of relief. Diane's true colors were on full display, and there was no hiding now. Jake, on the other hand, was pathetic. When it was his turn to testify, he shifted blame onto Diane, claiming he had only gone along with her plan out of fear. "I didn't know she would go that far," he stammered, avoiding eye contact with me. His cowardice was almost laughable. The trial lasted 2 weeks, but the verdict was worth every moment. Diane and Jake were found guilty of fraud, attempted murder, and forgery. The judge sentenced them to 10 years in prison. As the gavel came down, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served. But my story didn't end there. After the trial, I had a choice to make. Jake had written me a letter from prison, begging for forgiveness and asking me to wait for him. Diane, of course, had made no such gesture. Her pride wouldn't allow it, but I knew what I had to do. I filed for divorce. Jake had shown me his true colors, and I couldn't go back to the life I had before. My inheritance was secure, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my independence. I was no longer the naive woman who had let Diane and Jake control her life. Walking away from that chapter wasn't easy. I had loved Jake once, and part of me grieved for the life we could have had if he had been a better man, but I knew I deserved better. I deserved a life free from manipulation, greed, and betrayal. With Diane and Jake behind bars, their reputations destroyed, I began to rebuild. I used part of my inheritance to start a charity in my father's name, helping women escape toxic relationships and rebuild their lives. It felt like the perfect way to honor him and give back to others who needed a second chance. As for Diane and Jake, they faded into the background of my life. I heard through the grapevine that they struggled in prison, their once perfect image shattered. Diane, who had thrived on control and appearances, couldn't handle the reality of her situation. Jake, without his mother to guide him, floundered. I didn't revel in their downfall, but I didn't pity them either. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. For me, it was enough to know that I had survived their schemes and come out stronger on the other side. Now, as I sit here telling my story, I feel a sense of peace. It wasn't easy to confront the people who tried to destroy me, but it was worth it. I learned that resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about standing up, speaking out, and reclaiming your power. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that, more than anything, is the victory I hold on to. This was my story, and I reclaimed it with courage, dignity, and an unshakable sense of self-worth.